I'm a guy that's 26. Each day I build with bricks. I like Star Wars playsets. I'm Rich Boy J. Hello boyos, Rich Boy J here, back with another video, and today I'm here to talk to you about the newly announced UCS AT-AT set. Now, as someone who has built a custom AT-AT, I consider myself a bit of a licensed specialist on the topic, if you must say. I feel like I have myself a PhD when it comes to the AT-AT, so to speak. So if you've heard any other opinions on the AT-AT, you can just disregard those. This is the official, the licensed specialist take on the new UCS AT-AT. Right off the bat, I have to say I absolutely adore this set. I have a lot of people coming to me asking me my opinion on this and really kind of discussing how I feel it compares with my model, which is obviously the elephant in the room. A lot of people have over the years spent a lot of time either building, designing, creating, or constructing someone else's AT-AT design, because this is one that's been highly desired, yet one LEGO has surprisingly just not really attempted up until this point. So there's a lot of discussion going around as to, you know, which one is the best, how does this compare? And I have to say, this thing holds its own very well against mocks. I think right off the bat you're gonna notice, oh, there's so many exposed studs, which at this point feels like it can't even be an actual criticism of the set. I mean, yes, exposed studs, in my opinion, don't look as good as snot surfaces. 100%. That is my preference as a designer, as a builder. But I think LEGO has continually shown us when it comes to these mocks that they're not trying to actively avoid studs. Like, they will if they can, but they still want it to, in essence, look like a LEGO model, and I can understand that to some degree. I can understand why LEGO wouldn't want to shy away from one of the few things that distinguish a model as a LEGO product. So I can see from design, from a marketing, from like a company philosophy standpoint, why they would do that. So I'm not gonna harp on this thing too much for the exposed studs. Would it look better if it were smoother? Sure, but I can see why they still have a commitment to putting studs on sets, so to speak. So putting the stud argument aside, I think just the overall aesthetic of this build is wonderful. I think most of the proportions they nailed pretty excellently. Like, there are very few small gripes I have when it comes to design on this thing, and I'll talk about that later in the video. One of them I think is very noticeable. One of them I think is something that, you know, only I and maybe a few other people will care about, but still is something that me, you know, as a person who likes Star Wars, does notice. I think from the things that I like about LEGO Star Wars, this has to be, if not one of, maybe the ultimate Star Wars set. I think up until this point, my favorite LEGO set has been the UCS Star Destroyer. I think it just has a presence that is unmatched by any other set, but I think this one might actually take the cake from it. This set is just a very awesome combination between, you know, being at a massive scale. Obviously, the thing is freaking huge. It's like 2 feet tall, but also having what is essentially a full interior, which is something you can't say for most Star Wars sets, especially at this scale. Even the UCS Falcon has some interior, but it's not necessarily a full interior. The UCS Star Destroyer obviously doesn't make sense to have an interior at all. It's not to scale at all. But when we think about other, you know, big UCS sets that have any sort of interior, whether it be, you know, the Slave One or the UCS Shuttle, all of those are primarily cockpit centric. The Falcon took this a little bit further by having, you know, some little sections on the inside that you can access, but this one has a full-blown, full interior, and I love that LEGO is doing this. I think it shows that they're still committed to having that playability when it comes to these UCS sets. Like yes, these are adult models, but there still is value in having a full interior and having that accessibility and having a model that it really just feels lively on the outside as well as the inside. So with that being said, it's hard for me to compare really any other LEGO set to this, because it is one of, and maybe the only LEGO Star Wars like non-Starfighter set that we've gotten that is the correct scale and also has a full interior. And I think that's monumental. I think that's a really big deal, and I don't want for that to go understated. The fact that this thing, you know, has the multiple floors, it has the interior and the head, it has the speeder bays in the back, all of those things are just so lovely to me, because that was one of the things that inspired me to build my AT-AT initially. Not just having, you know, a big AT-AT, but also having something that just makes sense canonically through and through. So that's, I think, one of the most awesome things about this set. It does include a ton of minifigures to outfit the set, which is always a fun thing. But while it does include a lot, you know, you can't necessarily fill out the entire AT-AT. You know, you're gonna have to bring in some minifigures from some external sources to really have a full looking AT-AT, which I think there's always a lot of fun in, right? Like, it's fun to get a set and be able to use your existing, you know, sets, minifigs to kind of fill out the entire thing. So there's tons of chairs for snowtroopers on the inside, and I can't wait to see someone, you know, with a decent snowtrooper collection actually fill up the entire troop area of the set. The stability is obviously a big factor when it comes to a set like this. I think one of the reasons we weren't sure if this would ever happen were the stability concerns, and the fact that LEGO has pulled it off, I think, is awesome. This is one of those sets that we'd always debate about, you know, would LEGO ever, you know, release a quote-unquote UCS minifig scaled AT-AT? And the fact that these things are so top heavy and the legs are so small would lead you to believe probably not, at least not, you know, at a perfectly minifig scale. Like, there always was that feeling that there would have to be some sort of sacrifice if LEGO were to attempt a set like this. And I think there is a sacrifice, and it's one that might bother some people. I think most people really won't care about it, and that is the legs. And that kind of brings me into the gripe section of this video. The legs are just simply too thick. They just are. The legs are about like 3.5, almost 4 studs wide, which make them look a little chunky compared to the rest of the design. Like, I feel like if you look at an AT-AT and canon, one of the things that they're kind of characterized by, in my opinion, are those very thin legs. Like, it's a very big, bulky body, and they're on some pretty small legs. Now, LEGO has obviously had to make them a bit thicker. I would assume for stability, and probably more than anything to incorporate the gears in the knees and in the hips, because the gear itself, I'm pretty sure, is 3 studs wide. So at the very least, if they wanted to incorporate bending legs, it was going to be 3 studs wide. So I can understand it from that point. I can understand it from a stability point, but I don't know. I almost would prefer if the legs didn't bend and they were able to get a more narrow profile for the legs. This could ultimately change. Like, obviously, I built an AT-AT, the legs on mine don't bend. It's never been a huge factor for me on an AT-AT of this scale. That could change once I get it in hand. Like, maybe I get this AT-AT and I start bending the legs and I'm like, oh man, like, this is something I can't live without. But I do think, you know, for what is the ultimate design of an AT-AT, I kind of would like to see some thinner legs on this thing. It's not, I don't think it's a deal breaker, and I don't think it's going to be a deal breaker for anyone, but that's really the biggest design gripe that I have. Like, the one thing I look at this thing, I'm like, oh, that looks kind of off. Definitely would be the thick legs. The other thing is, and I'm not sure if this is a symptom of the thick legs or maybe the body just isn't wide enough, and this was the thing I mentioned earlier that maybe only me and a few other people are going to care about, and that's that if you look at, like, this picture, I'll pull this picture up, and if you look at where the body is, like, the body noticeably goes past the legs, right? Like, the widest part of the body, there's like a considerable amount of space between where the leg is and where the body sticks out. Now, if you look at the LEGO design, you can see that the outsides of the legs are almost flush with the outmost part of the body, if that makes sense. Like I said, this isn't something that most people are gonna care about, but once again, if you spend a lot of time looking at AT-ATs, you probably feel like, oh yeah, like, the body is super big and wide up top and the legs should be narrow and maybe even closer together. And I think that's a slight negative on this set. Like I said, not something that most people are going to care about, but just something I noticed. And the only reason I bring these things up are because, you know, I could nitpick the small fine details like the studs, like there maybe not being some insignificant thing on the surface of the exterior. But when it comes to a set like this, I think the top priority should be the profile of the set, right? Like if you look at it, is there anything that sticks out to, you know, an average person that they might feel like, oh, that looks kind of off, or it doesn't look right, or maybe they don't even know exactly what it is, but they just kind of have the feeling like something is amiss here. And those general profile factors are, I think, the biggest concern with sets like these. So that's really the only reason I bring up the thickness of the legs or how wide the legs are compared to the body. There's so much more I could say about this set, but I think I'm gonna hold back a little bit on it until I get it in hand. Black Friday cannot come soon enough. I will 100% be picking one of these things up. As someone who has championed Lego playsets, this might just be the ultimate Lego playset. It is of almost perfect scale. It has all of the interior it should have, and it looks good. Like, I don't think there's anything more I could ask from a set like this. So this is a total win in my opinion. This might just be the best UCS set ever. I'm gonna have to get it in my hands to fully make that determination, but in short, this thing is freaking awesome. I almost wish that I'd never designed my AT-AT so I could appreciate it even more. Like, even though, you know, I can kind of look at this set somewhat objectively and say, I think it's an awesome set, there's always that lingering feeling of, I really don't need this. I already have a Minifigure Scale AT-AT that I'm mostly happy with. But like I said, as someone who has championed Minifigure Scale sets, as someone who has championed play sets, I can't help but feel the need to support something like this because I want to see more things like this. Of course, when I get this thing in hand, you guys can 100% expect to see me do a review of it. You can expect to see me compare it with my own AT-AT. So you definitely should be looking forward to those things. And I think one last thing I do want to add, other than the awesome things I think that the set has to offer. And I think one last thing I do want to mention, because this is an important factor for me, surprisingly enough, I love that this set offers so much opportunity for the MOC community. And what I mean by that is Hoth is like the go-to MOC for everyone, right? Like, everyone wants to build a Hoth MOC. It's probably the most popular MOC to do in the community. And there are a lot of custom AT-ATs around, but I think most people will gravitate towards the sets, especially if they already have sets in their collection. I think people in general are just going to be more comfortable, especially if they're getting into building MOCs, to using sets as opposed to either designing their own AT-AT or building someone else's AT-AT. But the fact that there is now a Minifigure Scale AT-AT on the market, I feel is going to open a lot of people up to just making that much of better Hoth MOCs. Like, if there's one kind of downside with Hoth MOCs is when you're using the sets, snow speeders don't really scale very well to it. However, now that there's this thing on the market, I could see a lot of people using this to kind of spearhead them potentially building a Hoth MOC, and I think that's awesome. I can't wait to see what some people in the community are able to do with this thing. If they were maybe a little bit apprehensive about building someone else's AT-AT or designing their own, now they'll be able to build, you know, a Hoth MOC that is relatively consistent scale-wise throughout. Like, everything can be somewhat close to Minifigure Scale, and they can have an awesome looking AT-AT in it. So more than anything, I love what this does for the MOC community because I love looking at MOCs. So with that being said, guys, I'd love to know what you think about the new UCS AT-AT set. Is this one that you're excited to get? If you're someone who already owns like a custom AT-AT, whether it be mine or someone else's, is this something that you would still even consider getting? Do you think that it is worth getting? Like, if you didn't have a custom one, would you pick this one up, or would you still be leaning towards the custom AT-ATs? I'd love to know how people feel about this thing in general. So let me know in the comment section below. If you like what I do, go ahead and support the video by hitting the like button, support the channel by smashing that subscribe button, and I'll be back again very soon.